You'd think saving lives would mean something. That coming home would feel like a welcome, not a slap in the face. But what happened to my husband on his very first day back at work? It broke him in ways the battlefield never could. After everything he sacrificed, after all the nights I lay awake wondering if he'd ever come home, he walked into that building with pride, with hope, and just a few hours later, he came back crushed. You tell me, how can someone so brave, so selfless, be treated like he was nothing? Because what his boss said that day, it didn't just insult him, it made him question everything he believed in, and I still remember the look on his face, like someone had ripped the soul right out of him. But you know what? That wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. My name's Emily, and this is about my husband Daniel. Daniel has always been the kind of man who runs toward danger when everyone else runs away. Not because he's reckless, but because he cares. Even before the military, he was helping people. He worked as a paramedic, calm in chaos, steady in the storm. He'd come home late, clothes stained, exhausted, and still smile like he'd just done the most important thing in the world. Because to him, saving lives was never just a job. It was a calling. Then came the war. He didn't have to go. He chose to. He said, if someone has to go, I'd rather it be me than someone who's not ready. I'll never forget the day he left. He kissed me goodbye, held on to me a little longer than usual, and promised he'd come back. And every day after that, I held my breath, every phone call, every knock on the door, every headline on the news. I lived in fear, but I also lived in pride. Because my husband was out there doing what most people wouldn't dare to do. He was saving lives on the battlefield this time. Real lives. Real people. And some of those people, they only made it home because of him. Daniel's first tour overseas was tough. Hot days, cold nights, constant tension. But he never complained. Not once. He told me once over a crackly call. It's not the bullets that get to you, it's the waiting, the wondering. Still he did his job. Day after day. Mission after mission. One night, their convoy was hit. A roadside bomb tore through the vehicle in front of him. Flames everywhere. Screams. Chaos. While others froze, Daniel ran straight into the fire. He dragged a fellow soldier out of the wreckage. His leg was pinned, the truck ready to explode. Daniel didn't flinch. He lifted him up and carried him to safety. Seconds later, the truck blew. He saved that man's life. Another time, they were caught in the middle of a crossfire near a village. Civilians were screaming, terrified. One little boy had wandered into the street. Frozen in fear, Daniel dropped his weapon, raised both hands, and walked straight into the open, slow and calm. He knelt by the boy and whispered something. No one knows what, but the child reached out and Daniel carried him back to safety. Word spread. His unit started calling him Doc Steele. Because nothing rattled him. Not even the worst days. He earned a medal for bravery. I still remember the official letter. But what mattered more to Daniel were the lives he saved. By the end of his service, he'd seen and done more than most do in a lifetime. But it came at a cost. He came home with a limp in his right leg, shrapnel from an explosion they couldn't remove. And even worse were the wounds no one could see. He'd wake up some nights covered in sweat, breathing heavy, whispering names I didn't recognize. But he was home, and I was just so grateful for that. He said he was ready to get back to work, to help people again. We didn't know it then, but the real battle was just beginning. When I saw Daniel step off that plane, I almost couldn't breathe. I ran straight into his arms and didn't let go. I could feel the tension in his body melt just from that hug. We both cried right there in front of everyone. He was home, but he was different. Not in a bad way. Just quieter. He didn't talk much about what happened over there. Sometimes I'd catch him staring off into the distance, like his mind was still back in the desert. But he smiled more around me. He held my hand tighter when we walked. And every morning he kissed me like he knew exactly how lucky we were to still have each other. He told me he didn't want to waste time. He wanted to go back to work, as a paramedic. Helping people, that's who I am. He said, it's the only thing that still makes sense to me. I knew he meant it. Being a medic in the field had changed him, but it hadn't broken him. He still wanted to serve, still wanted to save lives, and going back to his old job felt like a way to heal. So we got his uniform cleaned, updated his certifications, and he started preparing for his first day back. He was nervous, but excited. We had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that station door. The morning of his first day back felt almost sacred. Daniel woke up early, polished his boots, and laid out his uniform like it was a suit of armor. I watched him adjust the badge on his chest. His hands trembled just a little, but his eyes were steady, focused. He looked at himself in the mirror, then at me. "Do I look ready?" he asked. "You look like a hero," I said. He smiled, kissed me on the forehead, and grabbed his coffee. As he walked out the door, I stood there watching from the window. I felt this wave of pride swell up inside me. He was going back to do what he loved. The whole day I was buzzing. I kept glancing at the clock, waiting for his shift to end. I even started cooking his favorite dinner, chicken pot pie. I imagined him walking through the door, tired but smiling, telling me all about how good it felt to be back, to ride in the ambulance again, to help people again. But when the door finally opened, that smile I'd been waiting for wasn't there. When Daniel walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. He didn't say a word at first. He just put his bag down, slowly, and sat at the edge of the couch, shoulders slumped, eyes on the floor. I turned off the stove and rushed over. "Hey, what happened?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "They don't want me on the ambulance." I blinked. "What? Why not?" He looked at me, eyes full of something I'd never seen in him before. Shame. He took a deep breath and repeated what his boss had said. "We don't need heroes here. We need people who can follow orders." I felt my stomach twist. He told me how during orientation, the supervisor made a few snide remarks, how they looked at his military record like it was a problem, not a strength, like the medals, the field experience, the lives he'd saved, meant nothing. His boss said Daniel might be too intense for civilian work, that his instincts could get in the way of protocol. Then, without warning, without discussion, they reassigned him to a desk, paperwork, scheduling, filing. No ambulance, no patience, no purpose. Daniel just sat there on the couch, rubbing his hands together, jaw clenched. "They think I'm dangerous, like I'm broken." My heart shattered. This man had faced death to protect others. He'd walked through fire. He'd saved people with his bare hands. And now, he was being told he wasn't good enough. All I could do was hold him. But inside, I was burning with anger. Because that wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a gut punch to everything he stood for. After that day, everything changed. I was furious. Fury mixed with heartbreak. How could anyone treat Daniel like that? After everything he'd done, everything he'd been through. But Daniel, he started to crumble. He stopped talking about the war, stopped talking about work, even stopped smiling the way he used to. I saw the doubt creeping in. "Maybe they're right," he'd say quietly, more to himself than to me. "Maybe I don't belong there anymore." He felt useless, like all those years, all that pain and sacrifice, meant nothing. At nightmares got worse. I'd wake up to him sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness, shaking. He'd mutter names, friends lost, moments replayed like a broken film. One night he told me, "The battlefield never let me go. But now, so does this place." I begged him not to give up. Told him he was more than his job, that he was more than their opinions. But deep down, I saw him slipping away. He was at a crossroads, either let this break him, or fight back. And I wasn't sure which way he'd go. Then came the call. It was late evening when the emergency dispatch crackled through the station. A child had been hit by a car, not far from where Daniel was sitting. But the team was short-handed. No one available to respond fast enough. The room went quiet. Daniel's eyes snapped open. Without thinking twice, he stood up and grabbed his gear. His hands moved on their own, muscles remembering what the mind hesitated to accept. I wasn't there, but he told me later. I knew I couldn't wait. That kid needed me. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for orders. He just went. Daniel raced to the scene, heart pounding. The child was unconscious, barely breathing. Daniel sprang into action, checking vitals, stopping bleeding, keeping the child alive until the ambulance arrived. He held the child's hand, whispering words of comfort he hoped would carry through the pain. When the paramedics finally showed up, they took over. But Daniel's quick response saved that child's life. For the first time since coming home, Daniel felt like himself again. But Daniel's boss, he was furious. When Daniel came back to the station, still catching his breath, the supervisor called him into the office. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. "You disobeyed direct orders. That's insubordination." Daniel tried to explain. "That child needed help. I couldn't just sit there." But it didn't matter. Rules were rules, and Daniel was reminded he was on thin ice. I could see the frustration in Daniel's eyes that day like never before. It wasn't just disappointment, it was something deeper, a heavy weight settling in his chest, the kind of hurt that doesn't go away with a few kind words. He felt powerless, pushed aside, and for the first time since coming home, he wasn't sure where he belonged anymore. But then, something happened that none of us saw coming. One of Daniel's co-workers at the station, someone who had witnessed what he did at the scene with the child, quietly started telling the story to others. At first it was just a whisper here and there, a few shared words in the break room. Then, the story grew legs. It spread from person to person, gaining attention without anyone trying to make it happen. Before long, a local news reporter caught wind of it and decided to cover the story. "Veteran saves child after being sidelined at work." The headline read, "Suddenly Daniel's story was everywhere." It went viral. People all across the country began talking about him, the man who had been pushed aside, told he was a liability, and yet had stepped up to save a child's life without hesitation or doubt. The messages started pouring in, from strangers who had never met him but were inspired by his courage, from other veterans who saw themselves in him and felt proud, from politicians and public figures who recognized the injustice and the bravery all at once. For the first time since his return, Daniel wasn't invisible. For the first time, the world saw the hero he really was. The public outrage was immediate and fierce. People couldn't believe how someone who had risked everything for his country, who had fought in the harshest conditions and saved lives on the battlefield, could be reduced to a desk job, punished for simply doing what was right. Veterans from all over joined the conversation. Neighbors, friends, even complete strangers. They all rallied behind Daniel. Social media exploded with support. Hashtags were created. Posts shared his story thousands of times. The local news stations invited Daniel for interviews. Letters and emails poured into the station where he worked, demanding that something be done, demanding respect for a man who had given so much. The pressure became impossible to ignore. Within just a few weeks, the weight of public opinion was too much for Daniel's boss to carry. The supervisor who had dismissed and punished Daniel was forced to resign. It was a victory, yes, but also a reminder of how badly things had gone wrong. Daniel was then offered his old position back, and more. A promotion, more responsibility, an opportunity to rebuild his career, to reclaim his place in the world he had fought so hard to serve. But then Daniel surprised me in a way I never expected. He turned it down. He looked me in the eyes and said quietly, almost as if he was still trying to believe it himself, "I don't want to go back there." He went on, "I want to make a difference, but on my own terms." That's when I realized something important. Daniel wasn't just ready to fight for himself anymore. He was ready to fight for others who might be feeling the same way, others who had been sidelined, ignored, or misunderstood. So he took a different path. Daniel started an emergency response training center, just for veterans. A place where men and women who had served could come together, use their skills, their strength, and their heart to help people in their communities. A place where they wouldn't be judged for their past, their scars, or their ways of doing things. It wasn't easy. There were challenges, setbacks, and plenty of moments when it felt like giving up was the easier choice. But it was worth every struggle. Because through this center, Daniel found a new purpose. And with that purpose came hope, not just for him, but for all of us who watched him rise from the ashes. He didn't need another medal. He never wanted recognition. All he ever wanted was to help. And now, he's helping more than ever before. This isn't just Daniel's story. It's a reminder that real heroes don't always wear capes or get the recognition they deserve. Sometimes they just keep doing what's right, even when no one's watching. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear that, no matter what, their courage matters. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice to remind the world what true heroism looks like. Thank you for watching.